She's the one who connected us with your group. She's a member of our socioeconomic subcommittee. And I saw that Wilda jumped on, and Wilda is she's on the Blue Ribbon Committee representing economic development in Lake County. So just wanted to acknowledge those two folks. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Wilda. So I'm going to provide some information about the Blue Ribbon Committee for the Rehabilitation of Clear Lake. And I wanted to get a little bit of input from you all first. Just wanted to know, it's hard to tell how far reaching we are. If you could raise your hand if you've heard of the committee before. If you just want to provide in the chat, like if you've gone to a meeting or if you're on our listserv or any of that, that's helpful. I'm seeing hands here and there, like 3, 4, 5. Great. And if you don't have your video on, you can use the raise hand feature in the participants panel for Zoom. Okay, so like a fair number of people. That's good to know. And I'll share the link for our listserv on our website when I'm finished with the presentation. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our team for facilitation, the committee's background and purpose, the membership of the committee, the organizational structure, and our coordination with the UC Davis research teams that started around the same time as the committee. I'll give you a diagram of the committee's annual activities, talk about the 2019 recommendations to the governor and legislature, and our funding request, and the implications of COVID-19. Sam talked a little bit about that and what our next steps are. So team for coordinating the Blue Ribbon Committee, the committee chair, and he's also the president of the California Fish and Game Commission. He has, he I think lives in Santa Helena, so he's over in your neck of the woods and really is passionate about Lake County. Dave Sepos is the senior managing mediator at Sac State. You just met Sam, who is the senior facilitator on the project and our project manager. I'm the associate facilitator and also coordinate the socioeconomic subcommittee. And then our colleague, Christina Maria Barrick, also helps with technical support. So the committee was established in 2017. AB 707, which was an Aguiar-Curry bill, formed the committee and specified membership. It talks about water quality and environmental conditions in Clear Lake and how that really impacts the entire economy and the welfare of the inhabitants of Lake County. And it also requires that the committee develop detailed recommendations to clean up the lake for environmental gains, with the intention that those environmental gains will improve everything else, from the economy to the health of the people around the lake, and spur economic development. And then to do that, the committee submits an annual report to the legislature and governor every year on or before January 1st. So the first report was submitted on January 1st of 2020, that's this year, for recommendations that were developed over the course of 2019. And I'll stop for questions at the very end, so keep those in mind. So the members of the committee, each of the 7 federally recognized tribes in the area has a representative on the committee. So the committee is a little bit under half tribes. There's 1 member of the Board of Supervisors, Lake County appointed experts with expertise in the following areas: economic development, that's WILDA, agriculture, environment, a public water supplier, and then there's also a UC Davis representative and a representative from the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. This is kind of a text-heavy slide, and I'll send out the slides when I finish presenting. But basically, it's telling you that the Resources Agency, the Natural Resources Agency, is the parent agency for the Blue Ribbon Committee. Eric Sklar is a designee of the Resources Secretary, Wade Crowfoot. And then the committee has 3 approved subcommittees. There's the technical subcommittee, the socioeconomic subcommittee, and the cultural TEK subcommittee. The technical subcommittee and the socioeconomic subcommittee have started. The cultural TEK subcommittee will probably begin meeting next year. And so we'll get into more of what they do in just a moment, but also you see in green, there are 2 research teams that began at the same time as the Blue Ribbon Committee. That's the Tahoe Environmental Research Center. They're studying the interior lake processes to see how that impacts the harmful algal blooms. And there's also the Center for Regional Change. and they're doing studies on socioeconomic, the status of the region. And so both of these research teams, they're sort of separate but parallel processes. So a lot of their information feeds into the Blue Ribbon Committee because the researchers sit on the subcommittees of the Blue Ribbon Committee. So we're going to go through some of the annual activities. This first row, of course, it's not a straight line, it's a circle. So each year, January 1st, the committee submits its recommendations from the to the governor and the legislature. And then they meet 4 times a year. In their March meeting, they'll receive updates on the report submittal and funding. By the June meeting, they'll get critical status updates of the implementation of the projects. And the subcommittees can also introduce new recommendations for the coming year's recommendations report in the June meeting. In the September meeting, those recommendations that were submitted in the June meeting will be sort of revised or refined to go into the annual report, which Sam and I draft. And then by the December meeting, there will be communication via email with the committee members, and we'll do a final review and approval of the annual report, which again will go to the governor and the legislature by January 1st. And then the whole process starts again on January 1st. So during that time, when the committee members, they only meet about 4 times a year, the subcommittees can meet more regularly. So in the March to June timeframe, they're beginning to develop recommendations specific to the areas of expertise. So either socioeconomics or cultural resources or technical lake science to alleviate the conditions identified in AB 707, which are the environmental conditions of the lake and how those impact the socioeconomic status of the region. And some of those recommendations might come from the previous year, things that were discussed but weren't refined. Then after when the new recommendations are introduced, after that, the subcommittees will review each other's recommendations. So the subcommittee meetings will review the technical subcommittee recommendations to make sure that there aren't adverse impacts on socioeconomics, and vice versa. The technical subcommittee might review from the socioeconomic subcommittee or the cultural resources subcommittee, and then they can review those technical recommendations just at a greater level of detail than the committee members can in their June meeting. And then after the September meeting, they'll sort of keep refining the recommendations so that they're ready for the December meeting. And then the subcommittees also, just as needed, they're great venues for different people with expertise in the different topic areas, either the technical lake science or socioeconomics or cultural resources. They're also intended because they're groups of really knowledgeable people to coordinate existing research efforts. I think my impression sitting in on the technical subcommittee meetings is that there hasn't been a group like this before. So we have members from Lake County Water Resources Department, we have the UC Davis research teams, we have the US Geological Survey, the US EPA that's working on the Sulphur Bank Mercury mine, the California Water Boards, the Tribal Cyanobacteria Task Force. It's really an impressive group of people. And we've just had 2 meetings so far at the socioeconomic subcommittee, but it's an equally broad group of people with a great level of knowledge. And then also the subcommittees are there in case the committee has any specific questions that they feel need to be responded to or researched. And again, I'll send out this very complicated slide after the presentation. So in 2019, the committee had 5 recommendations. These initial recommendations are mostly about gathering information. So they requested $5.5 million in the 2020 state budget for a distributed hydrologic model of the upper watershed. So that would take, that coupled with the second recommendation, a comprehensive monitoring plan for the upper watershed, means that they would take all of the data points that they receive in the monitoring plan and be able to create a model where they can run scenarios and see, if this much water runs in from stream, then what kinds of nutrients is that bringing into the lake, and how will that impact the harmful algal blooms in the summertime? It's really, I'm a layperson, but it's really very interesting meetings where they discuss the models and the monitoring plan. The third recommendation is a bathymetric survey. So the data on what the lake bed actually looks like is very much out of date. And so all that UC Davis is doing can be between 10 and 20% off, just because they don't know what the lake bed looks like. They don't know exactly how deep the lake is or what that topography looks like. So they need that information for the lake model to be accurate. The fourth recommendation is to do a review of the implementation and efficacy of existing programs, regulations, and best management practices to help the health of the lake. There are a number of programs and laws on the books to protect the lake, but it hasn't been looked at whether the organizations, whether the entities that are charged with implementing them actually have the resources to implement them. And if they're able, hopefully once there's an understanding what those requirements are and what's getting in the way of them being carried out, the committee might be able to help find the resources to make them more implementable. And then finally, an assessment of the public attitudes and behaviors impacting water quality. This would just be a public assessment of what people actually know about the lake. They do impacts the lake. If people know that when they drive their bed in the dry creek beds in the summertime, that loosens up soil that can bring nutrients into the lake and increase the algal blooms. So just checking in on what the public knows about. And then after there's sort of a baseline determined, then more public outreach can be done. And then after 5 years or so, the committee would want to do a second round of a survey to see if their educational campaigns have made a difference and what kind of difference they've made. And then, so these are all information gathering, but future recommendations would probably use this science and create more specific project, management activities on the lake. And we don't know what those will look like yet. So we packaged up this beautiful report with 5 recommendations for 2019, requested $5.5 million. We were getting a lot of really good feedback from the Resources Agency saying, yeah, this is moving incredibly quickly through all the steps that it needs to run through. And then I think March 11th was our first committee meeting of 2020. And I think everything got shut down March 15th. And so after that, we heard that there won't be any new funding allocated to projects that are not fire related or COVID related. And so we found that we weren't allocated any new money in the 2020-2021 budget. But we're looking into different funding options, different brainstorming exercises in our subcommittee meetings. And and so for this year, for the 2020 report, the committee is just going to be recommending funding for the existing recommendations. And in the meantime, seeing if any of the grants that we're applying for will come through or not. So that was a lot of information. I'm really happy to answer any questions, and maybe Wilda might be able to jump in and help out if she has any responses too.
Sophie, this is Terry Baranek. I have to say that my knowledge of the Blue Ribbon Panel really stems from the fact that I'm a board member for the Lake County Farm Bureau. I want to understand a little bit more about this money that Assemblymember Aguilar-Curry got for us. Am I correct that it was really to conduct this, what I'm going to call study and fact finding, rather than to implement whatever recommendations would be made?
Yeah, so there's currently there's sort of 3 different pots of money that that Aguilar-Curry secured. So there's funding for the UC Davis research projects. There's the CRC, which does the socioeconomic research. And then there's the Tahoe Environmental Research Center. And they're tasked with a very specific project to create a model of the lake to understand how within the lake and what the lake processes are, which clearly the lake. So the way that water moves in other lakes doesn't really apply to Clear Lake. So there's the UC Davis research. There's fairly minimal funding just to keep the committee moving, which is what Sam and I are paid through. And then there is there's $5 million in Proposition 68 funds, and that money can be distributed to on the ground projects, so it can't go to planning. So it can go to on the ground projects that will improve lake health. And so I think the idea was that the committee would do sort of planning and do their research. And then after a few years, when they had the conclusions, then that $5 million of Prop 68 funding could go towards actual on the ground projects. Now, because there's been a little bit of a delay and we haven't gotten the state funding we expected, we're starting to look at, the committee is starting to look at potential projects to fund, sort of just to keep the ball rolling, you know, and to keep the momentum moving. And so we're looking at 2 different projects right now. There's some hitch habitat restoration in Clover Creek. And then there's also, I think it's a fish ladder over on Kelsey Creek, but that hasn't been distributed yet. But the main purpose of the subcommittee is to come up with these recommendations and then apply for additional funding or request additional funding from the state. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Now I have one more question. So
Yeah,
I went back to the composition of the representatives on the panel. And if I'm correct, you said there are 7 tribal representatives and then representatives from these various subject matter areas.
Mhm.
Can you tell a little bit more about how the decision was made about who sits on the panel, and does it in fact represent all of Lake County in a, my words, fair and equitable fashion?
Yeah, well, that's a big question. You know, I wasn't involved when the committee members were selected before Sam and I came onto the project. But if you go to our website, and I'll pull that up right now, you can see the list of committee representatives. And I think it hasn't been updated for the most recent changes, but we have Sarah Ryans representing the Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians, Jennifer LeBay from the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board, Alex Tyler from Elam Indian Colony, Linda Rosas-Bill from the Hibitmatol of Pomo, Corolla Kennedy is representing Coy Nation, Eddie Crandall is the Lake County Supervisor on the Blue Ribbon Committee, Wilda Schock represents local economic development, Brenda Sullivan is representing agriculture, Harry Lyons is representing the environment, Jan Coppinger is representing public water suppliers, Mike Shaver is from the Middletown Rancheria. Jim Steele is no longer the representative for Robinson. He was, now it's Irania Quitiquit. Barry Logston is from the Scotts Valley Band of Pomo Indians, and Paul Dodd is from the University of California, Davis. So again, that was before my time when they made those selections, but I can look into how those decisions were made.
It just might be something that as you're making these presentations out, people might be interested in knowing. But thank you.
Yeah, and so the membership again is laid out in AB 707. So I think that Aguirre Curry and her people were the ones that made those determinations.
Okay.
Sophie,
Yes.
a couple of times I heard you mention a time frame of 5 years. So that I'm wondering, what was a timeline for this? Expectations about when all the implementations are done, or at least on their way. Because when I hear 5 years, I'm thinking, okay, a lot of people are meeting and a lot of talk is happening, and it just makes me wonder about the actual implementation and getting things done.
Yeah, and that's actually something that's been brought up a number of times by different people. I think all of you in Lake County have probably heard about a lot of different work being done on the lake. And it's like, okay, there's been study after study after study. Let's just do something and fix the problem. I think the 5 years, that was just about the public assessment. So the Blue Ribbon Committee effort actually doesn't have a date on it. It's, you know, it can keep going until the lake is better. And just as for now, it seems like when we did our first assessment interviews with committee members, when Sam and I came onto the project, we asked people, you know, have there been a lot of efforts on the lake before, and does this seem like it's any different? And many of them said that the difference between this project and this effort and past efforts is that this actually has state funding behind it, and this actually has a state agency, you know, reviewing the meeting summaries every month, you know, really deeply engaged. So that's all that I can say as far as efficacy, but I don't have specific timelines. I think that the work being done by the technical subcommittee has been really valuable, and it sounds like that that coming together of those experts at different levels is new and unique.
Sophie, I have a question. This is Jackie Castillo. What you just said, you know, to fix the problem. What, and maybe it, like you said, there was a lot of information there. Maybe I missed it, but you know, we have presentations like by Greg Giusti, who knows our lake very well, and Terry Knight, who knows our lake very well, and you know, we're always told and explained to how it is a natural lake. And it is a healthy lake. It's just cyclical, and when we have algae, and we all know why. So when you say fix the problem, what do you mean?
Yeah, so I was being a little bit tongue-in-cheek there, but and I am not a technical scientist in any way, but just sitting in the technical subcommittee meetings, first, that's part of what they're trying to determine is, you know, what are there things wrong with the lake? What can be improved? The two things that come to mind are, you know, the Sulphur Bank mercury mine did release a lot more mercury into the lake than would be naturally there. And so that contaminates the fish. It makes some of the fish inedible. And then also, I think from what I've heard, the level of cyanotoxins in the lake is actually quite toxic. Part of that stems from when the levees were put in for Middle Creek, onto Middle Creek. That sort of got rid of the wetlands that would have otherwise slowed down the flow of nutrients, mostly phosphorus and nitrogen, into the lake. And so now, for the last, since the 1920s, I think, phosphorus and nitrogen have come into the lake in greater volume than would have happened naturally if the levees hadn't been put in. And now they're finding that legacy nitrogen and phosphorus in the lake is actually, because of the temperature of the lake, sort of cycles, it doesn't stay at the bottom of the lake, it cycles back up, and that can contribute to harmful algal blooms. So that's my understanding as a layperson, but there's a lot of really interesting science coming out of the technical subcommittee right now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi,
Yeah,
Sophie.
Lisa. Hi.
That was a great answer. You're doing good from those technical meetings.
It's so interesting. I
Yeah.
love it.
So I'm a proxy for Donna Makowitz, who could not attend tonight, but she asked me to ask this question. I understand there's a deadline for the use of all the funds. Is there a timeline action that will be implemented? She follows the Blue Ribbon Committee's webpage and looks at the notes. Very interesting, well-developed committee, but she wishes as a layman she could see real action. For example, we know returning the coastline to Tules is beneficial, so why not just buy up important properties or remove the dikes at reclamation ponds and reroute the cutoff? I've only been here a year and I'm still learning the ropes. So that's from our CTA, Donna.
All right, yeah, that's a great question. So there's actually not a deadline for the funds, as far as I know. I think the $5 million of the Prop 68 funds, I think, can be spent whenever it's needed. And then, you know, we reapply, or, you know, we request funding from the state as the recommendations come up. So I don't think that there is an expiration date as far as I'm aware. The other question about real action and drawing up the important properties, you know, probably if you got 10 really knowledgeable Lake County residents in a room and we're like, okay, what's the action plan? How are we going to make this better? You'd probably get at least 7 different opinions. So I think that right now they're looking at the science to determine what exactly needs to be done, and where the best leverage is. What would be the activities that that would bring the most benefit? And it's actually been pretty inspiring in the committee. You know, we came into this process hearing sort of what I just anecdotally said about you know, conversations about the lake in Lake County, and have been pleased to find that the members of the committee actually work very well together and have been fairly in agreement on the recommendations moving forward. So far it's just gathering information, but we hope that real progress will be made soon. And that's part of what the Prop 68 funding, starting to allocate that, is all about, you know, starting those two fish habitat restoration projects, just to show some
You know, the
progress.
Middle Creek Restoration Project has been going on for a couple of decades and they've made a lot of progress. It seems slow, but I understand they bought almost all the property that they need to, and that those dikes and levees will be gone like in our lifetime. So thank you.
Yeah, and actually, so the Blue Ribbon Committee, they submitted a letter of support to the state for the Middle Creek Restoration Project. Everyone's very excited about that, and they've there's the Habimatol representative on the Blue Ribbon Committee has, you know, talked about how those are heritage lands and they want to make sure that they're involved in decision making for their heritage lands. But you know, just in this space, it's a number of different stakeholder important conversations and in support of the Middle Creek Restoration Project moving forward. It sounds like that project is a little bit at the whim of the Army Corps of Engineers. And there was conversation about if there's anything that the Blue Ribbon Committee can do, any funds they can allocate, but it's really, at this point, it sounds like it's waiting on the federal government. And the technical subcommittee received a presentation from Marina Deligianis, who is on the restoration committee, and she works at Water Resources Department. I bet if you asked her, she might provide a presentation for this group as well.
Thank you, Sophie.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Other questions? These are
So-
really good in-depth questions. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
This is Terry again. Just to be clear, you said that there's not a timeline on the money, but am I correct that it's tied to availability through the state budget and other priorities can trump it?
Not, so the $5 million of Prop 68 funding, no, that's allocated. It's in an account for the Blue Ribbon Committee. It's not going anywhere. We just have to come up with the appropriate capital projects. So that means it can't go towards planning. It can't go towards environmental review. It can't go towards research. It has to be building something.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as I know, funding for the committee itself, which, you know, is just the money to keep it going. I don't think that's going anywhere either.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but you know, like what happened this year, the money for the recommendations are going to be different year to year. And we thought that we had the funding for it this year, and then COVID and fires took priority. So we weren't able to be funded. Great questions. Other questions?
We're just here to test you, really, Sophie. You know.
Oh
that-
yeah, you're doing great. It looks like Wilda had to jump off, but I was gonna put her on the spot a
I
little
think
bit.
she's here.
And Sophie, meetings are public record, right? So anybody here could attend the meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. The meetings, I think we had like one or two where there are a little bit of technical difficulties, but otherwise all the recordings are on the website, which I shared in the chat. And anyone's willing to attend. It's subject to Bagley-Keene, so agendas have to be posted 10 business days ahead of time. The summaries have to be posted publicly, and there's a public comment period in every meeting.
Awesome.
All right.
Wow, that was a lot of information in like a half an hour. You know that?
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for asking such great questions. That means you really care. I've really enjoyed being on this project. I'm from a rural community as well, Madera County, which is north of Fresno County, and I grew up in the mountains. And it's just, it's been really nice to get to know Lake County a little bit and see all the folks involved and see how much everyone's heart is in making it a great place to be. So thank you for having me. And let me put my email in the chat and reach out with any questions at any time.
That's cool. Thank you so much, Sophie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sophie, we look forward to talking with you again.
Yeah, thank you. And again, thank you to Lisa for making the connection.
Thank you, Lisa.
Lisa always rocks it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Awesome. So we will, what time is it? It's almost 7. So we'll just wrap it up here, you guys, but I want to thank you guys all for coming here today. And and just your, you know, your continued interest and support of the CTA program and the knowledge that we're all gaining by being CTAs. I think it's truly amazing, and it warms my heart to see it. And I mean, we had like, you know, almost 20 people here tonight. I think that's so cool. So thank you all for your love of the lake. It's beautiful. So our next social, yay, good job, Judy. Judy's got such a smile. So our next social will be on Tuesday, December 8th. We're gonna do a holiday party. You guys, those of you who were here last year, we did it at Eli Stage Shop, which was really one of my favorite ones that we did, but can't do that this year. So there will be things going on. I know, huh, Tony? I know. We'll figure out ways to do things and have some fun, but hopefully you guys can all join us and invite all your other CTA friends. We did our last training, like I said, in November last Saturday, and had like 5 new CTAs, and that'll be our last one for this year. And then we'll put together a whole new plan of attack for 2021. And I'm sure it'll be much different than 2020. God will. But anyway, so that's the announcement that I have. Michelle, do you have anything? Oh, and don't forget, in case, I'm sure all these dedicated people here on this Zoom call have renewed your CTA membership, but just in case you have until December 31st to renew your membership, just record 50 points, bada boom, bada bang, easy to do. If you guys have any challenges or issues, just reach out to Michelle, myself, the chamber, and we'll walk you right through it, but it's really easy. So anything else, you guys?
I just want to say you and Joe look really cute in your matching flannel shirt.
I know, I saw that. What the heck? So funny.
Buy your shirts together.
What's that?
If you buy your shirts together.
No. I don't know, but I'm checking the wardrobe for tomorrow night at the chamber meeting. I can tell you that. All right, you guys have a great evening. Thank you for being so awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
For great CTA.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.